That moment, captured on shaky police body cam, was the end of a months-long mystery. It started with a woman and a briefcase walking out of an Iowa apartment complex. 60-year-old Elin Gowan. No one knew it then, but it would be the last time anyone ever saw her alive. 13 days later, her body was found under a rural bridge. Blunt force trauma, a fractured tooth. But the cause of death? Still undetermined. What happened in those missing hours will reveal a twisted love triangle, lies, evasion, and one man running out of time. Where are you watching this video? Hit subscribe and like. The morning was cold, bitter, and forgettable, the kind that fades into the Iowa sky like smoke. But for Sugar's Diner, February 13th, 2023, would mark the last day one of its longest-serving waitresses, 60-year-old Elin Gowan, ever walked through its doors. She wore her tiredness like a shawl. Her co-workers knew she'd been through a lot lately. Years of bad luck, heavy drinking, and a trail of broken relationships. But Elin was also strong. Tough. She had that no-nonsense grit. A woman who showed up, who never missed a shift, who called when she was running late. That's why, when she disappeared, people noticed fast. Elin had just finished morning shift when she texted her daughter. She was heading out to grab her belongings from a man named Mike Brockman, a friend she'd recently stayed with after breaking things off with her boyfriend, Sam Brammer. She said she was getting picked up by a co-worker. That was the plan. But what actually happened was much darker. There's a brief moment of clarity on surveillance footage. Elin, stepping out of the apartment complex, clutching a case. Calm, focused. It was the last image of her alive. And she didn't leave with a co-worker. She left with Sam. Magnifying glass tilted left a tangled web. Elin's life was complicated, especially when it came to men. Just a week before she vanished, she had broken up with Sam Brammer, a volatile man with a drinking problem and a short fuse. Those who knew Elin say she left him for good. Others say she was scared. After the breakup, she stayed with Mike, someone she'd met at the diner. Friendly, familiar, but there were rumors, unsettling ones. Friends said Mike had tried to mess with her. One even said Mike climbed into bed with her uninvited. When Elin disappeared, suspicion fell immediately on the two men who had circled her in the weeks before, Sam and Mike. Both were known to have short tempers. Both had been rejected, and both had something to hide. The Council Bluffs Police Department opened an investigation within 24 hours. Elin's daughter filed a missing persons report, but without a crime scene, a body, or any real clue, detectives were left chasing shadows. That is, until her boss, Megan, received a strange text. "Leave me alone. I'm done." This wasn't how Elin texted. She made phone calls. She used punctuation. Her daughter called her constantly. And above all, she was responsible. Something was off. Way off. Ice Cube, the cold case begins. Investigators started where most do, by pulling security footage. Council Bluffs is a small city, but still large enough that CCTV footage could take days to collect, tag, and organize. In the meantime, police turned to Elin's circle, the men in her life. Mike Brockman was up first. To the untrained eye, Mike seemed calm, helpful, cooperative. He admitted Elin had stayed at his place after leaving Sam, but said they were just friends. She'd come crying one night. He said he gave her a hug. Nothing more. They'd never slept together. But detectives weren't convinced. She told people you crawled into bed with her. One officer asked him, spooned her from behind. Any truth to that? Mike stiffened. No, I wouldn't do that. She was scared. I hugged her once. That's it. But Elin's close friends told police a different story. That Mike had overstepped. That she was uncomfortable. Still, there wasn't enough evidence to press charges, or even hold him as a suspect. So the police let Mike go. For now. Then they turned to Sam Brammer. And things got strange. Fast. Magnifying glass tilted right, the ex-boyfriend story. Detectives met Sam in a cluttered room with dim lighting. He was already defensive, combative, but what he said set off alarm bells immediately. You said I was the last one to see her alive. The detectives looked up. We never said she was dead, Sam. That was the first red flag. Why would someone whose girlfriend had only been missing a day refer to her in the past tense? Did Sam know something they didn't? As the interview continued, Sam seemed nervous but overly confident, like someone trying too hard to seem innocent. He admitted he picked Elin up from Sugar's diner. That part was true, but then he claimed he dropped her off at Mike's house. That was a lie. Security footage from that morning showed Sam's truck circling neighborhoods nowhere near Mike's house. He drove past gas stations, Burger King, looped around for nearly an hour, but at no point did he go near Mike's. And during a critical 2-hour window, Sam's car disappeared entirely. No cameras, no GPS, no traffic light footage, nothing. At 1 p.m., his truck was spotted again. This time, Elin wasn't in it. Police Scarlight, camera doesn't lie, Sam. Back in the interview room, detectives confronted Sam with what they found. We have your truck on camera at 36th and Broadway, 9:28 a.m. heading west, toward Omaha, not Mike's. Sam blinked. I went straight home. No, you didn't. Your plates are on the footage. Where did you go? Sam leaned back, shifting uncomfortably. I don't know. Just driving around. He was unraveling. The story was crumbling, but he wouldn't break. Detectives released him, frustrated. With no body, they couldn't make an arrest. Not yet, but they weren't the only ones watching Sam. That night, Elin's son Jack showed up at Sam's door and demanded answers. What the hell did you do to my mom? Sam's response? He slammed the door in Jack's face. Later that night, Sam called his granddaughter and said something chilling. I'm going to see Grandma tonight. Emily panicked. She thought her grandfather was going to hurt himself. She called the police. They found Sam at a local bar, drunk and incoherent. When officers tried to calm him down, he said something even more disturbing. My girlfriend, she left me, went back to that guy. He tried to mess with her. The implication was clear. Elin had told Sam Mike had assaulted her. Sam was furious, possessive, jealous, and now Elin was missing. Officers placed Sam under psychiatric watch for 72 hours. But even that wouldn't stop what was coming next. The walls were starting to close in on Sam Brammer. His lies were beginning to collapse under the weight of scrutiny, and behind every polite smile in an interview room, a detective was watching and waiting. For days, Sam had carefully painted himself as a heartbroken, innocent man trying to help his ex-girlfriend through a rough patch. But something was off. His words never matched the footage. His tone was too rehearsed. His timing too convenient. And now, after a series of increasingly bizarre statements, including a haunting comment about going to see Grandma, Sam was unraveling. After a tense conversation with his granddaughter, Emily, where he hinted he might harm himself, officers found him slouched over the bar, surrounded by empty bottles and regret. He was intoxicated, incoherent, and slipping further into something darker. When asked about the disturbing comment he made to Emily, Sam denied it, but the worry in the room was palpable. Officers gave him a choice: check himself into a hospital for psychiatric observation, or be placed under involuntary hold. Sam agreed to go willingly, his defenses crumbling just enough to reveal what everyone already feared. He was coming apart at the seams. While Sam spent the next 72 hours in psychiatric care, detectives got to work. Now that he was out of the picture, they turned to the people who knew Elin best: her daughter Nicole and Sam's own son, Justin Brammer. The things they revealed made it painfully clear. The relationship between Elin and Sam was far more toxic than Sam had let on. Nicole didn't sugarcoat it. She said Sam had a short temper, a volatile edge, and a habit of throwing Elin out for minor arguments. Over and over, the cycle repeated. She'd leave. He'd beg her to come back. But this time felt different. Nicole said her mom had called her just days before vanishing and said she was done, tired of being kicked out, tired of the chaos, tired of him. Justin tried to downplay things. He said Elin had her own issues, that Sam was just trying to help. But when pressed, both acknowledged the same truth. This was a relationship teetering on the edge, and someone, if not both of them, was bound to fall. As detectives unraveled the emotional chaos of their relationship, another piece of the puzzle was clicking into place: the final surveillance timeline. And what it revealed would blow Sam's story apart. At 8:30 a.m. on February 13th, Elin was seen waiting outside Sugar's diner. She told her daughter a friend, not Sam, was picking her up, but Sam arrived. They drove to her mother's apartment, where Elin picked up a safe containing $11,200, a cash down payment for a new apartment. At 9:30, they went to the Sherwood Apartments. But the leasing office was closed. What happened next? A complete detour. Sam's truck was captured on camera driving aimlessly. He circled residential neighborhoods, passed gas stations, even stopped at a Burger King. But at no point did he go near Mike Brockman's house, despite swearing that's where he dropped Elin off. From 9:45 to 10:30 a.m., he was seen looping around town. After that, he vanished for 2 hours, off the grid entirely. No traffic cams, no doorbell footage, no location data. At 1 p.m., the truck resurfaced. But Elin was gone, armed with this damning timeline. Detectives called Sam back in for another round of questioning. This time, they weren't playing around. They laid out the facts plainly. He said he dropped Elin at Mike's? Impossible. The cameras had him heading toward Omaha. Sam's face paled. He looked down. I don't remember that, he mumbled. But the truth was written all over his face. The officers didn't need a confession. The evidence spoke for itself. He was lying. Again. Still, Sam doubled down. She walked in front of the truck. He repeated, I turned around and left. It was the same story, word for word. Even after being told it was physically impossible. The footage didn't lie. But Sam just wouldn't budge. He was caught, and he knew it. Yet something in him refused to give up control. That night, as detectives reviewed the footage again for absolute certainty, Elin's son Jack showed up at Sam's door, boiling with grief and rage. He pounded until Sam answered, What the hell did you do to my mom? Jack demanded. Sam didn't say a word. He looked stunned, like he'd seen a ghost. And then, without speaking, he slammed the door shut. Whatever was left of Sam Brammer's mask, it shattered that night. Later, Sam would call Emily again. This time, his voice trembled. He told her goodbye, that he was going to see Grandma. Emily, horrified, called 911. Police found Sam, again drunk, again fading, and this time they didn't ask. He was placed back under psychiatric watch. But even that wasn't enough to stop what was coming. When Sam was released days later, he returned to something that resembled normalcy. Shopping at Walmart, running errands. But one officer, off duty and suspicious, spotted him in the parking lot and decided to ask a few questions. Sam smiled, nodded, and asked if he could move his truck to a better spot first. The officer agreed, and then Sam hit the gas. Tires screamed. The engine roared. Sam's truck peeled out of the parking lot, nearly mowing down the officer. Within seconds, he was a blur on the highway, weaving between cars at over 100 miles per hour. The chase that followed was reckless and dangerous, tearing down peaceful Iowa roads with sirens screaming behind him. Officers radioed in, watching the truck disappear into the horizon. But when it became clear Sam wasn't going to stop, a call came to the radio. Shut it down. The risk was too high. Sam had escaped. Again. But the chase wasn't over. Not really. Hours later, while officers scoured the town for hiding spots and bolt holes, Sam did the unthinkable. He went home, right back to the Cottonwood Apartments. And no one thought to look there, not immediately. For one whole day, he disappeared into the shadows. But the next morning, like clockwork, Sam walked into the police station and turned himself in. This time, he wasn't charged with murder, not yet, but with evading arrest and reckless driving. He was finally behind bars. But only for one night. Emily bailed him out. It was a move that baffled many. But family ties are messy, even when steeped in tragedy. Once again, Sam was back on the streets. But what he did next would be the clearest indicator, yet, that he had something to hide. First, he walked into a bank and deposited a thick wad of cash, $1,200 to be exact. the exact amount missing from Elin's safe. Then, without hesitation, he drove his truck to a scrapyard and ordered it to be crushed. Not sold, not parted, crushed, completely obliterated. Sam stood there the entire time, watching the process. He didn't leave until the truck was turned to dust. It couldn't be more obvious. The cash, the lies, the evasion, the destruction of evidence, the psychiatric meltdowns, and above all the footage, the timeline, the 2 hours where no one knew where he went. Sam Brammer was hiding something, and very soon, a horrifying discovery would finally bring his secrets to light. For 13 days, Elin Gowan was a ghost. Her name was whispered in diner booths, her photo pinned on every telephone pole, her face flickering across the evening news. Family and friends held on to hope like it was the last thread keeping their sanity intact. Some said she just needed a break, a mental reset from the chaos of her life. Others weren't so sure. They'd heard Sam's voice crack on the phone. They'd seen the look in his eyes when questioned. They watched him run, then walk, then destroy the only evidence he had left. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And then on February 26th, a call came into 911, a call that turned the entire investigation on its head. The voice on the other end was young, shaken, almost disbelieving. We're driving down the road to go shooting, and there's a dead body on the side of the road. The dispatcher froze. Male or female? It's female, for sure. The coordinates came in. Officers were dispatched. And just like that, the ghost had a name again. It was Elin, beneath a bridge in Potawatomi County. Tucked along a quiet gravel road near a public shooting area, a woman's body was found partially hidden under leaves and debris, her clothes matching the exact outfit Elin had worn on February 13th. The scene was eerily silent. No tire marks. No witnesses. Just her, lifeless, fragile, and far too still. It didn't take long to confirm what they already suspected. Elin Gowan had been found. Her daughter, Nicole, collapsed upon hearing the news. Friends cried. Jack, her son, stood motionless for a long time before simply walking out of the room. The confirmation of death wasn't a relief. It was devastation. But now there were no more questions about if, only how and who. And in their hearts, they already knew the answer. But the body brought more confusion than clarity. At the hospital, the coroner examined Elin head to toe, looking for obvious signs of what had killed her. She had 8 blunt force impacts to the skull, strong, targeted blows, and a fractured front tooth, as if someone had punched her with brutal force. The injuries were violent, deliberate, personal, but none of them on their own were lethal. There was no stab wound, no bullet, no organ trauma, no broken neck. After days of analysis, the official cause of death came back, undetermined. It was the most frustrating result law enforcement could have received. They had a body, yes, but no smoking gun, not legally, and without a clear cause of death charging Sam Brammer with murder. Even with all the lies, the surveillance, the sudden truck destruction, and the psychiatric breakdowns, would be nearly impossible in court. Still, they weren't empty-handed, because what they did have was just enough to start turning the screws. The safe that Elin had taken from her mother's home was supposed to contain $11,200. When Sam was spotted at the bank days after her disappearance, he deposited exactly $1,200 in cash. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Then came the truck, his beloved beat-up truck. The same one caught on every camera from the diner to the bridge, had been driven to the scrapyard, crushed, and shredded into untraceable fragments. Sam watched the whole thing, never flinching. To detectives, that was all the confession they needed. They moved quickly. Within hours of the body's discovery, police filed for a warrant to charge Sam Brammer with abuse of a corpse, and officers rolled up once again to the Cottonwood apartments. This time not to ask questions, but to end the game. A knock came at the door. Inside, Sam's granddaughter answered, the same one who had once bailed him out, now staring down a hallway of consequences. Officers stepped in. Calm, controlled, professional. Ivan, step out here. Show us your hands. Sam appeared in the hallway, blinking in the morning light. You got a warrant for your arrest. He stood there in silence. "We'll explain everything. Just step outside." "Let me finish my smoke," he muttered. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. He just looked defeated. This time, there would be no more running. No more fake alibis. No more psychiatric holds or trips to Walmart. Sam Brammer was taken into custody for what detectives believed was only the beginning of what they could prove. And they were right, because now they had Ellen's body, and her body was still speaking, even if quietly. As forensic teams studied her neck under magnification, they found something unusual. Zipper-shaped abrasions, thin and faint, running diagonally across her throat, not deep enough to strangle on their own. But when paired with other pressure points and bruising, a picture started to form. They believed she'd been strangled to death, likely using an article of clothing, zipped tight, suffocating her slowly. Then, once dead, she'd been dumped near the bridge. The blows to the head had been rage. The real killing? Quiet, cold, controlled. It was personal, and it pointed to only one person. Sam Brammer, Ellen's on-again, off-again boyfriend, the last man to see her alive, the one who watched his truck be destroyed and made suicidal comments on the run, was now at the center of a murder case. Even without a formal cause of death, prosecutors believed the totality of evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance, bank deposits, destroyed property, inconsistent alibis, family testimony, emotional unraveling. And now, the body, it all told the same story. And on November 17th, 2023, a jury agreed. Sam Brammer, full name Ivan Samuel Brammer, was convicted of second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and theft. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison. No possibility of parole. For the family, it was the closest thing to justice they'd ever get. But it would never bring Ellen back. She was a mother, a waitress, a woman who had spent her life trying to find something that felt like peace. Instead, she found fear. And in the final days of her life, she was surrounded by the people she trusted least. The story of Ellen Gowan isn't just about what happened. It's about how far someone will go to hide the truth, and how eventually the river always reveals what's beneath. Before the case, before the news vans and crime scene tape, before her name was tied to a murder, Ellen Gowan was just a woman trying to survive. She wasn't famous. She didn't have money. She wasn't someone the world paid much attention to. She was 60 years old, working long shifts at a small-town diner, going home sore and exhausted, fighting for tiny pieces of normal in a life that had rarely felt fair. Ellen's world was built on second chances. Some she gave, some she took, and too many that never came. She didn't have much, but what she did have was routine. A job, a daughter, people who loved her, even if she couldn't always love herself back. But behind the counter at Sugar's Diner, no one saw the storm she carried. Ellen had battled alcohol dependency for most of her adult life. It followed her like a shadow, wrecking relationships, forcing hard resets. People describe her as sweet, warm, someone who could make you laugh even on your worst day. But when she drank, the world tilted. She'd fight. She'd vanish. She'd cry to herself in parking lots, ashamed of the choices she kept repeating. Those closest to her knew the pattern. Ellen would get into trouble, hit rock bottom, then pull herself back up, just enough to function, just enough to work another week, and convince herself things were getting better. But they rarely did. The men in her life didn't help. Her ex-husband had left years ago. Since then, it was a string of relationships that never lasted. Some because of her drinking, others because the men were worse. Controlling, abusive, unstable. Ellen was always trying to find comfort in places that didn't have it. She moved in and out of apartments, lived with friends, slept on couches, always one eviction notice or argument away from being back where she started. Her most recent boyfriend, Sam Brammer, was no exception. At first, things seemed hopeful. They got along, laughed, cooked dinner together. Sam thought he could fix her, make her quit drinking, but that idea would curdle fast. Sam wasn't patient. He had a temper. And when Ellen couldn't change fast enough, the fight started. Ugly ones. Ellen's daughter, Nicole, would often get dragged into the chaos. One week, Sam would kick Elin out. The next, he'd beg her to come back. It was a revolving door of drama, emotional whiplash. And every time Elin tried to leave her good, he'd pull her back, with apologies, with promises, with guilt. Nicole once said, "They were good when they weren't drinking," but that never lasted long. When Elin finally moved out and stayed with Mike Brockman, it felt like a step forward, a clean break. Mike was just a friend, someone she met at work, someone who seemed to care. But even that would turn into another bruise on her story. Within days, friends claimed Mike had crossed lines, that he'd made unwanted advances, that Elin felt unsafe. So, once again, she went back to what was familiar to Sam, even if it meant hiding it from everyone. When she told her boss and daughter that a co-worker was giving her a ride that morning, it was a lie. She didn't want them to know she was back with Sam. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she didn't want the lectures. Maybe she just didn't want to admit to herself that she was repeating the cycle all over again. That morning, she packed her things, picked up her savings, $11,200 in cash, hoping to put down roots, start fresh. But by 1 p.m., she was gone, and the world kept turning. No Amber Alert, no breaking news. Just another woman the world didn't notice until it was too late. In many ways, Elin's life mirrored her death. Unseen, minimized, treated like an inconvenience. The systems that might have saved her, shelters, rehab programs, law enforcement, were always just out of reach. Not because she didn't want help, but because help doesn't always knock when you need it. She lived with pain, silently, like so many do. Addiction, codependency, emotional trauma. But those words don't end up in police reports. They don't show up on surveillance footage. They don't make headlines until there's a body under a bridge. Even the cause of her death reflected how society treated her life. Undetermined. Not enough to call it murder. Not enough to call it natural. Just unsolved. But those closest to her knew better. Elin didn't just disappear. She didn't die quietly. Someone made that choice for her. Someone took advantage of her vulnerability, of her hope. And even if the courts couldn't name the cause, her family could name the consequence. They buried her on a windy March morning, the kind that whips across Iowa fields and stings your skin. Friends from the diner brought flowers. Nicole and Jack stood silently beside the casket, staring down at the one person who never stopped trying, even when everything else gave up on her. In life, Elin had always been chasing stability, a roof, a warm meal, someone to love her without conditions. In death, all she got was a number, a case file, and the hope that someone, anyone, would finally believe she mattered. The truth is, Elin Gowan's story isn't rare. It's terrifyingly common. A woman falls through cracks, slowly, quietly, invisibly, and no one sees it until she's gone. But maybe, if people had listened sooner, if the warning signs had meant something, she wouldn't have become another cold case with a warm smile. Maybe she wouldn't have become the woman they forgot. On the surface, February 13th, 2023, looked like any other Monday in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was cloudy, cold, forgettable. But by the time the sun set, Elin Gowan, waitress, mother, survivor, would vanish from the world without a trace. Her final hours didn't start in darkness. They began with purpose. At 8:30 a.m., Elin stood outside Sugar's Diner, suitcase in hand. She just wrapped up an early shift and was waiting for a ride. She told her daughter and boss that a friend from work would be picking her up. That wasn't true. It was Sam. But she didn't want anyone to know she was back with him. Not after everything. Maybe she didn't want the judgment. Or maybe, deep down, she was already afraid. Surveillance footage confirms it. Sam's truck pulls up and Elin climbs inside. She looked calm, focused, maybe even hopeful. She had $11,200 in a locked safe, money meant for a fresh start, a new apartment, her own place, freedom. First, they drove to her mother's apartment at Dudley Court. The camera catches her carrying the safe to the truck. Then, they head to the Sherwood apartment complex. But the leasing office was closed. No apartment, no new start, just a locked door and a long day ahead. And then the script changed. At 9:45 a.m., Sam's truck is seen on surveillance again. But this time, he's not heading toward Mike Brockman's house like he claimed. Instead, the vehicle loops aimlessly across town, making circles like a man stalling for time. He stops briefly at a Burger King, then keeps driving. By 10:30 a.m., his truck disappears off the grid. For the next 2 hours, no cameras catch him. No cell towers ping his location. Sam Brammer and Elin Gowan are gone. That void in the timeline isn't just suspicious. It's critical, because when the truck reappears at 1 p.m., Elin is no longer with him. Every camera after that shows Sam alone. What happened in that 2-hour gap is still technically unknown. There are no witnesses, no video, no audio. But the evidence tells a clear story, one built on movement, motive, and destruction. Investigators believe it was during this window that Sam murdered Elin. The method? Subtle, calculated, quiet. Forensic examiners would later find zipper-shaped abrasions across her throat. Evidence consistent with strangulation, likely using clothing or a purse strap. It wasn't loud. There was no struggle in public. No blood. Just pressure until there was silence. The blunt force trauma, 8 separate impacts to her head, came either before or after a loss of control, rage, finality, a fractured tooth, bruises that told a story even Elin couldn't anymore. But here's the part that tells us everything. Sam didn't stop after she was dead. He didn't panic. He planned. Instead of calling 911, instead of confessing, he drove her body, limp, lifeless, out past the quiet neighborhoods, down a gravel road near a public shooting range, and dumped her beneath a bridge like trash. He left her under leaves, hoping nature would hide the evidence. Then he drove home. Alone, he sent a text from her phone to Megan at the diner. "Leave me alone. I'm done." A message Elin would never write. No grammar, no punctuation, no voice, just a clumsy imitation of someone who never wanted to vanish. He sat with that lie for hours, and then he kept going. The next day, he deposited $1,200, just a fraction of the money Elin had withdrawn. The rest? Maybe spent, maybe hidden, maybe destroyed. What matters is that it was hers, and he knew it. Not long after, he took the truck, the same truck seen on footage, the one he'd used to pick her up, transport her body, dump her, and drove it to a scrapyard. And there, in broad daylight, he watched as it was crushed and shredded into oblivion. He stood still, arms crossed, never flinching, as the only physical link to Elin's last day was turned into metal dust. He wasn't just destroying evidence. He was erasing her. When detectives confronted him, Sam repeated the same line like a broken record. "I dropped her off at Mike's." But they knew better. They had the route, the timestamps, the fact that he never even came close to Mike Street. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a lie, one designed by time. And it nearly worked. But something about guilt always leaks out. And for Sam, it didn't form a paranoia, panic, and collapse. When Elin's son, Jack, showed up and asked what he'd done, Sam didn't respond. He just stared like a man who'd seen death up close, then slammed the door. He told Emily, his granddaughter, that he was going to see Grandma. He fled a police interview. He led a 100 miles per hour chase down public roads. He went home like nothing happened. He turned himself in. He got bailed out. Then he vanished again, until her body showed up under that bridge. And with it, his story ended. On November 17th, 2023, a courtroom finally caught up to what everyone else already knew. The jury found Sam, full name Ivan Samuel Brammer, guilty of second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and theft. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. There was no dramatic outburst, no final words, just the clang of chains and a door that shut behind him. Hopefully for the last time. For Elin, justice came late, but it came. And the story that began with a woman quietly disappearing ends with the truth crashing through every lie Sam ever told. Because in the end, No matter how long you run, the truth always catches up.